Hello, I'm Andrew Constable from the Centre for Marine Socioecology at the University of Tasmania. In October 2021, I gave a workshop on the Southern Ocean Knowledge and Information Wiki, or SOKI, to the Krill modelling group of the international program Integrating Climate and Ecosystem Dynamics of the Southern Ocean. The aim of the workshop was to provide the group with an idea about how SOKI could be used for them to develop their team, for acting as a repository for information that they acquire, but also as a means of providing information more broadly to the research community and to the public at large. Before I begin the recording of that workshop, I'd like to pay my respects to the Moanina people, elders past, present and emerging, who are the custodians of this land from where this talk is presented. In beginning the talk, I'd like to acknowledge my co-editor, Jess Melbourne Thomas, who has been an invaluable part of the development of SOKI since 2012. The workshop begins with me introducing the initial page of SOKI and then proceeding from there. I hope you enjoy the presentation. Thank you. At the top, you can see the main menu. This is the place where you can get all of the information about Confluence. So SOKI is a wiki environment that uses the program Confluence, which is by Atlassian. And Atlassian originated out of Sydney, but is now a global operation, and Confluence is used globally. It's a very common program. So we built SOKI in Confluence. If you want to work out why we chose Confluence over other wikis, you can go to this space here, which is about why I have this wiki, and then inside that space, you can read about why we chose Confluence over other things. And one of the main reasons was the user-friendly nature of it and the security of it. And you'll appreciate as I go through just why we were looking for security. But I won't go into that detail here either. So what happens is up here on this main menu, you can find out, depending on which bit, you can find out which parts of Confluence you might be using at the time. Both the SOKI symbol and about takes you to the same page. It's the about page. So anytime that you feel you're in trouble and you want to navigate back to the beginning, just press the SOKI symbol or the about page, and it'll take you back to the beginning. And with this opening page, you can find the primary spaces, which are listed down here with their descriptions, and also the subspaces, and I'll describe those in a moment. So it's a good way to just get back to the beginning and then work your way through. The next part of the menu is the home, and this is your home. It's not the Confluence or SOKI's home, but it's your home. And so what this shows you is what your recent activity was. And so you can see here what I did today, what I did yesterday. Up here, you can see the spaces that I've been working in. Again, I'll describe that in a moment. And so spaces that you're occupying often, and Southern Ocean models will be a space that you would occupy whenever you go into SOKI. You can always click on that and it takes you straight into your working space. And I'll go into that in more detail in a moment. So the home area is where you can design that for yourself to give you the best way of working. The other thing about the home page is also you get all of these updates. What have other people been doing? And so all of you, as you've been signing in, because I'm an administrator of SOKI, then I see what happens everywhere in SOKI. This is the point that you need, if you're going to use SOKI, you need to trust the administrators. And at the moment, there's only two. So you only need to trust me and Jess. So we see everything that's going on. But for me and Jess, we don't look at what's going on. We're just interested in that it's working. But whatever you do, we don't actually monitor at all. That's up to you to manage. And so this is something that you can look at and you can tailor it to what you want as well. Then if you, the next part of the menu up the top is the recent activity. you can see here that it's exactly the same as what's in the home space, but this can be tailored to some of the things that you've been working on, various drafts that might be going on. And I'll talk about that in a moment as well, but also some starred spaces. I don't have any at the moment, but it's an important thing I wanted to show you how to use starred spaces. So recents is actually a way of burrowing into the work that you've been doing, but also the work that others in your group may have been doing that you wish to follow. And that's what these different headings are for. The next part of the menu is spaces. And this is probably the part that you'll most want to refer to when you're trying to navigate across SOKI. There are two main parts to this. One is the recent spaces that have been seen, and then the other one is to view all spaces. Now here, because I'm an administrator, I get to see all spaces. So what is a space? SOKI or Confluence has three main ways of navigating through the area. A space is an autonomous part of the environment. It can most easily be thought about if you consider it to be an area where a project group is working. And so as a team, the models Krill group, which is what's been established here, can have its own space. And therefore, everybody on the team can see the space, unless it's restricted and so on. But there's some other advantages too about having a space. All of you in the team can get updates about what's going on in the space. So as a working environment, it's actually really useful to have a space because you can be updated then when somebody else has been editing a page, or there might be some comments that have been put on a page, or there might be a blog going on in the space. Anybody that's following the space will get those updates. And so as a working environment, it's actually very useful. What's in under the space then is there's two main things that will appear under a space. There are the pages, and the pages is a typical wiki hierarchy or web hierarchy of pages. And there's also blogs. And so you can have a running commentary on particular issues, just as you would a blog, but also the documentation and the outputs of the group, which we'll talk about in a moment, can be all within the page environment. And then you have another thing which is to the side about navigating information is the comments, and you can put comments on the pages. And you can bring up all the comments that you might have done, you can follow the team's comments and so on. So you can have discussions within the comment environment, which is then different to discussions that you might have in the general blog environment. And so the discussions within comments are about a page. The discussions in the blogs are about the space as a whole. So there are two tools there that you can use as a project team to help communicate about things, one at the high level and one at the specific page or task level. So up here, on the menu, which is looking at spaces, that's just giving you access to the different spaces that you might wish to use. And there are various spaces within SOKI that you would, I think, are very useful as a group to have an eye on, to be able to reference, and to also contribute to, not just within your own project space, but also these other spaces. And you'll see how that'll knit together in a moment. The next thing to look at is how to find people. And you can see here that I've got Alexis and Devi up as collaborators at the moment. That's because of what I had done is in my example page for the Krill modeling group. I put some tasks for Alexis and Devi both, which you'll see in a moment, and that's why they're listed here. But I can also access other people by just going search and then searching through here for various people. If I wanted to find Jess, you can see here that there are 3 Jesses in SOKI at the moment, and Jess Melbourne Thomas is the middle one. And so I can click on that, and of course something would go wrong right now, wouldn't it? But anyway, let's not worry about that. If I get stuck elsewhere, then I'll see about that. There are various apps you don't need to worry about, and there are various templates which you don't need to worry about either. We can deal with that later. I deal with them in a fuller workshop, but this is really just for discussion. We can have another discussion later about that. Okay, so let's just zip back to the about page, the space right at the beginning of SOKI. There's a whole bunch of information here which you can look at, which I'm not going to go into, but it details the sorts of things that SOKI is trying to do. But I want to talk to you about a couple of things, and I'm going to give a presentation built within the SOKI environment. And so here I'm going to just talk about, I'm going to click on Logic of SOKI, and there are two images here which I've developed to try and help you visualize how your group might use SOKI for the work that you wish to do, but also then how you might extend your own work into other aspects of SOKI as well. So I'm just going to click on the first figure. And so this is the first figure that came up, and I can just click on these arrows and I'm giving my presentation just by using figures embedded in the page. And so that's one of the nice features about SOKI, is that you can string a whole lot of figures together with a narrative within a page. It can be available to everybody, and then you can give a presentation like this online and not have to worry about all the other aspects of the page. So what I wanted to talk to you now is, well, what is the structure of SOKI and why is it set up the way it has been set up? And so there are a number of things to think about. Firstly, there is a private space and a public, oh, sorry, there's not spaces. You can have a page that's private, or you can have a page that is public. What it means to be public is that an anonymous person anybody in the world, if they know the SOKI address, they can tune into SOKI and they can see all of the pages that are in the public space. We designed it this way because we wanted, when we develop species profiles, when we develop discussions about habitat features in the Southern Ocean, we have, and I'll show you these later, but methods for field methods, laboratory methods, indicators that might be used for indicating various things, models, and so on. The aim was that we wanted the policy of, and this is the first line in this slide, is if you need to write it down, write it here. And you don't need to write everything, because as a group, if you start a page, you give it a bit of structure and you give it a bit of direction, and then you send share the page, which you can do, share the page with the team and say, look, I thought of this idea, how about we build a page like this? And everybody puts their bits into it, you work it out, you develop it, and then once it's developed, so you might build a draft on some sort of observing system, observing method, you build it up in the private space, and then you say, now we're going to publish it. And so it'll go through the SOKI review process, and then it gets published in the public domain. It'll have a DOI, it's completely citable, traceable. We will be publishing in Zenodo, so it gets a DOI and it's traceable. And so that means that when the public sees that page, they can then cite that page and you can get credit for that work. And what that means is that you can develop much more detail than you can normally have in a usual paper in the literature. You can provide good detail about a method and how to do it, what the pitfalls are, how you get over those problems and so on, have all of that detail there, and then get credit for sharing it. And so you can have that on your CV. So that's one of the things that we wish to do, is not only have a space for teams, but also have this capacity to all of the developmental work you do. As I say, if you need to write it down, write it here. You can share it amongst your teammates. You can open the permissions up and share more widely, and then eventually publish it in the public space. So that's the basic philosophy that we had, and that's why we needed to have a secure environment. All wikis other than that we found that were open source, you could hack. There was no real security in them. And certainly no security in the long term if you happen to leave your work behind. So we felt that this was the best way to go. So this is the second point on this slide, is that we wish to have an environment where you could actually work within a whole team, or you might have a part of the team, or you might wish to have some pages which are only you. And so that means you can develop ideas and use it as a way of making notes and so on. But because you're in a formal internet setting, it means that you can then have links that are going in, you can be working in a completely linked environment, and all of your work can end up being published. Anything that you're organizing, developing ideas and methods, you can have it published in the SOKI environment and go into the public domain. Still has a peer review process, but it's much more relaxed about how much space you need and the kind of detail that you need to properly share your thoughts and ideas and methods and so on. So the other point here then is that I've used SOKI a lot over the years in terms of getting my ideas down in my own pages, organizing them in a way that I can share, having links. So I'm not writing everything. I'm just saying, oh, I'm going to use this method, and then I link off to the method page as appropriate. I'm going to use these parameters and I link off to the biology page as appropriate. I'm going to use this model and then link off to that page. And so anybody going through those steps has automatic links to all the detail they need to know about what I'm doing. And then gradually the team builds around that. And then you start building results pages and so on. And in the end, I was even writing papers at a first cut in SOKI, which you can use in a team environment, just like Google Docs. So you can build it up in a more formal setting than, Google Docs, I find pretty hard to manage. Having led one of the chapters in the IPCC in the current round, I was continually reorganizing the Google folder because there was no discipline that people had the time to do. Even though it was important, people just didn't have the time. So by and large, having an environment which forces you to do certain things as you go is quite helpful. But you can document, as I said, you can document your methods, tools, you can develop summary knowledge and summary tables. You can have a summary which just simply links to all of the papers without having to write an excessive summary and so on. And then, as I said, you can publish the fundamental work in detail on a SOKI public page. So that's what this slide aims to do. So you can have a look at that in more detail. And the big background arrow here is that basically you can work from, it's not just one way, it's an interacting interface. And you have these different spaces so as you can organize your work around those spaces, going from observations, whether that be in the lab or the field or databases somewhere and so on, building up your knowledge base, so species profiles, habitat profiles, function, different parameter sets and so on. There's a modeling space, which is what you'll use. And then there are these syntheses, assessments and reviews. And it's this review space, which is where MISO sits. And a lot of the results in MISO will be published in more detail on these pages than they will in the papers. Okay, so how do you need to think about SOKI and the spaces? So there are a number of spaces, as I showed, with different functions. You can create more spaces. And so what's referred to as you go through SOKI is that you'll see that there's these overarching spaces, whether that be knowledge, modeling, and so on. There's administration, which is for the administrators and things. But within a space, you then are basically building around pages. And that's what this is intended to show. And so you can have a number of high-level pages which are on the home page of the space. Each space has a home page. And so you might have these child pages of that home page, and they're the top, if you like. So there will be some subspaces or spaces that you'll see will actually have nothing in them. They'll just have links to their first topics, if you like. So that's just a way of getting started. But then under each one, you might have one which is just really the page, the topic page, which then takes you straight into child pages that are in the public domain. And that might be a way of pushing things out to the broader community that you would like to see taken out there. And then other things, there might be much greater complexity. There's nothing stopping you from having a lot of these top-level topics pages. You can have a lot of those. You can have very simple links or very complicated ones, but it's worth visualizing just as a set of hierarchies like this. And I've indicated that the blogs sit at the space level and the comments sit at the page level. Okay, so that's a rough idea here. So I'm going to do a very fast go through, fly through of SOKI, just as a sequence of just to show you how it is structured. Right, there we go. So if I was starting here, and if I wanted to look at what knowledge is, I can go straight to a knowledge, which is an overarching space. And then there are these things called subspaces, which have the attributes of a space. So physical environments, habitats, biota. So we can do that. Let's just jump straight into biota. And there's a key thing here. On each page, what I've been doing is trying to set up these home pages of each space to show you what's on the home page, but also then what's the page directory for that space. You can see whenever there's the right-facing arrow, then that's just, you can get into the subdirectories or sub-pages. So that's the hierarchical structure that I was indicating before. Okay, so that can give you an idea of the page directory. So these are all the MISO biota pages that are going to be published soon. And we can click on one of those, but I won't just for the moment. On the left-hand side, I use this all the time because this is, when you're in a space, you can have this left-hand bar, which gives you the overview of the space, which is the home page, but also you can get these, this is the page directory. And if you have that listed all the time, then that's really helpful. Another thing that's really helpful too is that you can go into another window and you can, if I can spell correctly, let's not go into the old, that's it. You can have another instantiation of SOKI. So then when you're editing a page, you can be editing a page here and then looking at references here to get your links correct. So you can have many of these pages open if you want to use them as sources. So you don't have to have SOKI only open once and moving around backwards and forwards. You can do it across a number of windows, and that makes editing much easier. And I'll show you why in a moment. So let's just go to a quick example. One of the long-standing examples that we've used is in the penguins. And you can see this fly up pretty nicely as to the different kinds of penguins that we have. And this is a template and which has been filled in, but it's in review. And so eventually this top part of the template will disappear when we finally publish it. But basically, if you go through, there's a basic template that's used for the biota pages, and we've got templates for a lot of the different spaces that can then give the information. There's a lot of freedom about how you fill it in. There's no particular requirements about how you fill in under these headings, but it's good to have some information. One of the things here that we've tried to do is that when parameters are being used in models, we try to have them included in these pages. So as in that's part of the material. So in life history, for example, you might have one table, which is the overview, but then there might be another table which gives you specific parameters that you might use in a model. But then there's all the other information that you would use and think about. And then later on, as you scroll through, you get to the point of seeing all the references that underpin that space, and then the people that were involved in developing this profile. And then eventually, unfortunately, the macro doesn't work because of the changeover, but eventually that would appear as the citation, this list of authors with the title of the page, SOKI, and the date at which it was finalized and the DOI. So that's just as an example for the biota pages. Then I can go through all of this, and I don't have the time to be able to show you everything, but just as an indicator of, for the observations area, let's say you're wanting to identify particular methods. There's a whole bunch of field methods which we've included here. So colony-based methods, so the adult penguins, and this is following a template. This happens to be a standard Kemp method. And so the details as to the origin of the method. And you'll notice here that there's actually not a lot of detail because you can click on Kemp and go to the method in Kemp. So the aim in SOKI was never to try and do all the same again and be the only place. It really was it's like a clearinghouse. If you need to write it down, write it here. But if it is somewhere else already, then just put a link to where it is. So then you don't have to burden yourself with a lot of work. And so hence there's not a lot of detail in here except a link to the Kemp, and it just gives you the background. But again, there's a bunch of methods in here that you can look for. So let me just show you one of the features that's quite important. For navigation, when you go up here and it shows you current and recent, then what you see here is that it's only a partial list and it's only the recent ones that I've been to. You don't want to have to view all the spaces all the time. And so how do you actually deal with that? You can go into the all spaces that's available to you and say, well, let's say you want to see the biota space often. So if that's the case, what you can do over here is click this star. And so when it's starred, then it will come up for you. And so we've got the biota space. You might well use the habitat space a lot. You might wish to use the indicator space. And then in particular, you're going to want to use the modeling spaces. So that's for the models, and Southern Ocean models is where you're going to be mostly. Okay, so I've just done those, clicked on all of that. Now, if I go up here, it hasn't updated yet. And it's not going to help me here. Oh, yes, it has. It should be showing here under spaces. I think it probably because I need to, this problem that came up before might be a problem for me. Oh, there they are. I just refreshed the page, but you can see the starred spaces are here now, and they will always show up when you click on the spaces menu. And that's really helpful because it means that you don't have to worry about all the other spaces unless you wish to choose them. But then I would suggest you use this method of starring them so as they all come up. So let's just go straight to the Southern Ocean model space. So in this space, this is where there's descriptions of the models already. And some of these are ready to go public. So the MISO Food Web model, so these have been published in the Food Web's paper. And you can see the reference, the type of model that it is and when. There's a listing of all the EcoPath models. And then in the recent discussions, there's been a number of papers that have done some perturbation experiments. And so there's the list of papers here, and then there's a description down here as to what's going on. I'm not going to go into the detail, but I just wish to show you that they're there. There are these other models which also, so this net logo model, which was developed in our modeling group a few years ago. And what Meryl did with this model is that she provided a number of pages where there's the setup of the net logo model, then there is the different components. So this was the NPZD component. Then there was another component which was on the foraging species and so on. And each one of these pages provides a detailed description of what was done. You could never get this published. But what it does is it gives you a very clear idea about how to implement this model within NetLogo. And it gives you all the descriptions of the different components and the like. These are the kinds of pages that we would encourage people to have published because they would enable people then to do the modeling much more easily next time. And so when we actually get this incarnation of SOKI going, this will be published and put in the public space. And Meryl will have then the DOIs on all of these pages. And so you can go through this at your leisure just to see what's going on. We've also got a description of the Atlantis model that's being developed. Now I've got, yes, this one's possible. So the descriptions in here. So here is the general Atlantis all the packages that with all the links. Again, we haven't tried to describe things that are already adequately described elsewhere. But then we go into the system configuration, so figures and all the understanding that you need in terms of trying to build an Atlantis model, if I get it done correctly here. So as an example, no, that's not been filled in. So have a look through that and you'll be able to see just how we're going with the Atlantis model for East Antarctica. This might actually have better detail. Yes, this is the one. I wanted to just show you the page. Yes, this is the one. So this is the initial data compilation for Atlantis. And you can see here all of the different groups that we used. And then in the child pages, you can see all the parameters and abundances that we use to drive the initial process. So it's a way of assembling the information. It doesn't get lost, and eventually this gets published in the public domain. And it means that you get credit for this basic work. It also means that all of the descriptions that say, oh, this didn't work, so we did this, those things that you couldn't get published in a paper but would be good for the next person that's following up, that information then is contained in a reasonably formal way. So how might you use this to help you? I set up a page called the Krill Modeling Group. And on this page, I've put the members of the group, which you can see the table there. And then there are child pages that you might wish to develop. There's actually a directory under that. So if you establish a child page, let's do that now. So we'll just establish one. We'll just call it this workshop. We could add something in here. And then we publish it. So there's publish up here. Now in here, you can add links. So there's up on the menu, you can add a link. Now you may choose a page that we've been to before. So this is just showing you recent ones, or you may wish to search for one. So you can just type in a word and then it'll tell you, give you options for pages that have Atlantis in the title and say, oh, well, we'll have that one. So there's the link straight to that page. You could also search just by going back into your another window, search for what you need. And then because that becomes a recent page, you can then look at that and it will show up here. The about page won't show up. Okay, so that's how you do that. And then you publish it. And then, so that's this workshop. We're still on that page. Let's just go back to the Krill Modeling Group. And there it is, it appears for you. So that page has been established. And as you build your hierarchy of pages, that will build on this homepage. So you won't need to worry about that. I can show you how to edit that. There's a whole bunch of things behind it. There's very simple tools for building pages like this. So that's what's behind. Now, if you want to start to edit a page and you're not quite finished, so let's just say in this field, we're going to add some notes to that field, whatever that might be that you wish to share with other people, or it might be a notice to take account of when the next person comes in. You go, oh, I'm not quite ready to publish that. I can close that page. So it goes back to the original, but then you go, okay, I'm ready to edit that again. Oh, there it is. So you haven't lost any of that work, and that's really nice. You can lose that work though by just going up here and pressing on the string of dots and just go that you want to delete. Where it is, I haven't done it for so long. Revert to last version. That will do. Then revert page. And there we go. So it's reverted to the last version. The other thing that I really like about Confluence is that it's got a version control system. So up here, I can press on this yesterday, and then there's the version controls. So I can just scroll back through that, and I can resurrect an old version if I wish. So it's possible that, you know, if you find that you don't like some edits, you can go back and look at it and go, okay, is that what I want? And no, that's not what I want. So then you can just go back in there, and then you can move on from that if you wish. So that's all good. And you can look at the whole page history if you want. You can even delete some of them if you find that they're versions that you really don't need to keep track of, and just keep the bare essentials in terms of when you've made some major changes. But let's just stick with the current. Okay, so one of the things that I've done here, because of all of these links, you can just go through the page pretty quickly. You can see I've added a comment here. I can add more comments. You can reply to comments and so on. So you can have comments as a thread or just as a series of comments. But also what you see here is that there are options for planning. So Debbie's done her task, which is fantastic. She actually prepared for the workshop. Terrific. Alexis is still falling behind there, but she did prepare, so we can just click that off, and so that's done. Now I will have received a notice that Alexis has done what she's done, so I get that in my email. And so if you're not working on things like the IPCC, then when you get emails, just like in Google Docs, when you get a notification from Confluence, then take notice of it, because something will be there for you. Okay. So you can add these things, and they're easy to add when you go into editing, and I've shown you how to do the links already. So just in terms of adding points on a work plan, is that you can do it by up here on the menu bar. You can see that you can, it's got something for an action item. You can locate a person by just putting the @ sign, and to put the date, you just put the double forward obliques. And so that's how you can generate that. And one of the nice things about that is that on your page, your home page, you can see all the tasks that you have from the different pages, and also you can start to use the home page as well as these pages to then notify others of what you're doing. So it's all very amenable to developing work plans and things equivalent to Gantt charts and the like. So that's all I wanted to cover. I was speeding up towards the end because I realized that I was going well over time. You can see that I've got lots to talk about in relation to SOKI, but hopefully that was enough to give you a bit of a taste. So if there's any particular questions or ideas or things that you would like some comments on, then feel free. Now's the time. Back to you, Alexis.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I myself have questions, but I wanted to open the floor to everyone else first and see if you guys have any questions or comments.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was just wondering if you could give a bit of clarification on the private versus public pages. So when you created the child page, you then published it. Does that make it publicly available, or is that just available for the people in that group to work on together?
So that's a great question. They're under this. So you can do your own restrictions if you have the privileges on the page that you have the restrictions. So the Krill modeling group has editing permissions for the entire Southern Ocean modeling space, except when somebody is chosen to not give you permission. So, and that's the way that you can operate. So you can choose, here you can see that the models Krill have editing privileges. I'm not going to remove that. But what that means is that you can create a child page, and then you can administer those whatever privileges there. So you can go here and say, well, I want to actually, I want to allow Jess to edit it, but I'm going to choose that only specific people can view and edit. So you can actually keep that quite private, and just add that. You can really tie it down so as you might allow people to view it, but not edit. You can do that too. So you can go here, can edit or can view. So I can make all of you now, you can see this page, but you can't touch it. So you can provide that opportunity if you want to have that constraint. I don't see any reason why people need to leave everything open. There may be a time that you would like to work on it by yourself and you close everything off and just leave access to you only. Or you may say, I'm going to share it with a few people, but I'm not going to give you editing rights, but they will be able to comment for you. So they can then comment on the page, but not be able to edit it. So those are the kinds of things that are available to you. So you can control that. It can only go out to the public if the space has been made to be able to go to public. So at the moment, most spaces aren't actually accessible from the public domain. And that's because I don't think that, because I've had to migrate it, I need to be sure that it's all the permissions are right. So if I open a space up, I don't want people outside to be able to go to places that they shouldn't have been able to go to. So that's what that's intended to do. So yeah, it has pretty good controls over that.
Thank you.
Speaking of a page going public, Andrew, can you tell us more about the peer review process?
I can. So if you go to the About, there are two places that you can look at the peer review process. One is in a cursory level, or you can look at it in some detail. So you can get to this. This is all available to you. You can see what the editors do. Why don't I just work through just quickly the SOKI management and processes. You can get a lot of the detail here. So if you wish to look at the governance arrangements, a lot of this has been hasn't been active for some time, but this is what I'm planning on resurrecting: the steering committee, managing editor, content managers, and so on. So that's all here. You can read about that. But in particular with the peer review process, which you can read about, it talks about the review process, external peer review, internal peer review. Because it's a wiki and it's pages, we don't believe that the peer review process needs to be onerous, because pages won't be very long. It should be almost have a quick look and say, yep, that's fine. But anyway, there's the ideas for the review conditions. And so you can read about all of that. The intention is that, and then we've got a wiki policy, which is looking at what's intended, so as a peer reviewer can actually see what SOKI is trying to do, how it's been set up, and what's expected in the content and the like. So it's all there. But again, the aim is that it will have 2 peer reviewers for a page. It will be more a click and flick type process. It will have the editors of a section. So whether it's a biota space or so on, they need to then approve the process. But once that's done, the peer reviews go on file. So if we are ever audited for the quality of the peer review process, then that will be available. And then when the page goes out, all of these things will be met. So as a quality assurance part of the science literature, we would try and maintain exactly the same principles. Is that enough for now, Alexis, on peer review?
Yeah, that's great. Just one follow-up question to that. I noticed when you were cruising through the Atlantis page that there was a reference code, which I think is great, whether it's linked to GitHub or not. I'm wondering if the peer review also reviews the code.
Well, now that's a great question for any science journal. My preference is that well, it depends on the code. A peer reviewer would be expected to do a review of the page. If the page is about code, then they'll need to review the code.
Okay.
If the page is dependent on code, but it's not about the code, then there needs to be some sort of reference to what state the code is in.
Okay.
I don't believe any journal reviews code. And I think that's one of the downsides of our peer review process, that there's models that I've actually built from the ground up to see whether or not they perform the way they say they perform, and they don't. And yet there's lots of papers published on them. And even though the authors are aware that I found those things, they've not been changed. So, that is a failure in our system. As the science gets more complex and more complex tools, those tools aren't being reviewed properly. So yeah, that's a problem. But certainly my intention is that if it's about code, the code would need to be reviewed.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. Katerina.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my question is again linked to the private versus the public space. And what I think is quite cool is that you can store more or less automatically your R scripts or biota information in Zenodo and get an DOI for that. And my question is it possible that I can see in the private space which model or biota information is already published in Zenodo, and can I see the citation for that?
So we haven't published anything yet. This is the pages have gone through the MISO process and then reviewed. And now that I've done the migration, then one of the things over the course of the rest of this year is to then have those pages go through the Zenodo process, and then what will happen, and this is what we've had planned, is that each page will have a PDF attached to it as well, and the PDF is what will be the foundation of the DOI. So if the page actually gets changed, then there'll be reference to the fact that that's been changed, and then it would need to go through another process. So the aim is to be able to see almost like software, where you have your main version stamped, you then might see changes as you go, and then you'll get another one stamped, and so on. So that's the aim, is that the pages will be continually updating as the people responsible for the page feel that it can go into the public space, and then eventually it will get published when it's of a sufficient change that it's worth publishing again. So Dominic.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Andrew. My question is, if I develop such a page and maybe I have a model description or so, or a model I want to present, is it also possible to embed code in a page, or maybe even do something like a markdown document or so to make it even more transparent, even more interactive, and these things?
Well, the shorter answer is yes. The long answer is we had a number of, in the biota pages, we had a part of that page which would interrogate a database in the Australian Antarctic Division. It's a SCAR database, the Southern Ocean dietary data. And it would, whenever you went into the page, it would interrogate the database and give you a list of the diet, including proportions and all of that stuff. So it's completely up to date, and you could embed that code. So there is a macro code that you can use, but we haven't been able to reinstall that. But it's certainly something that I think is important to keep it as a dynamic and up-to-date process. So yes, the capability is there. We just need to install that. If you'd like to help install something like that, then that would be great.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see if I get some more insights into SOKI. I think it would be a really cool feature to have, because I think often when you read a paper about a model, it's just such a long and exhaustive description of the model, you get lost in the middle of it. So it would be good if you could maybe run the code piecewise and see what actually happens and how this one component of the model is working, for example, and if this is accompanied by a description and maybe a visual output of it. So yeah, I think this would have a lot of potential, maybe.
Yeah, if you were wishing to do something like that, then I would suggest that a dynamic link with GitHub would be the way to go. And you manage the modeling capability inside GitHub. We've had this discussion quite a lot in the ACRC as to, should we be investing in the documentation in GitHub or in SOKI? And we ended up with a hybrid capability, which was where you would have sufficient documentation in SOKI, so as then people would know where to go. You'd have the link to the GitHub repo, and people would go there then for the more detailed descriptions. But I think what you're talking about is certainly something that would be good to do, but I would suggest it would be integrated with GitHub. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Emma?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. This has been really interesting. I noticed, I've been having a little fertile around while you've been talking. I noticed there's a page under research for projects. Is there a way of linking to external projects? Because we have pages, for example, hosted on the BAS website, which detail some of the ongoing project work we've got. Is there a way just to put in a simple link to that? Or do we need to? There is. Okay.
If you look at a lot of our documentation, a lot of the pages are really short. You know, for my pages, when I have my research projects, I'm just going, oh, I need this, and then here's the link, and I need this, and that's what I described at the beginning. And that's really good to have all of the links assembled in one place. Yeah, so that's certainly very possible. But, you know, that's one of the things too, is that if you feel that at any time, if you want a particular link to an external program, you know, set up a page which is titled to that project, and then just have the link on the page. And then that means it's got visibility. Up here, this search bar is really important. If you can't remember a page or where you had something, you can search just like you're searching the internet. This is inside Confluence. And you can get all of the records. Let's say we, yeah. So if you want to know where all the Atlantis is, then you do a search, and this is all the places that we talk about Atlantis in Confluence. And so you can see some of the things here will be repeated. That's just because it's on the same page. But you can look at the address, you can see when it was mentioned, and all of that. So anything that you want to know if it's there. Let's see, you know, what we've got on emperors. You can see that we talk about penguins in pack ice. There's in biota, we talk about it. There's in the net logo model and so on. So if you wanted to find out all of the information on penguins, emperor penguins, then you can find that. So, you know, if you have the permission to see it, you'll be able to see it come up here. And so that's a good way of just trying to identify where might I find parameters, or where might I find a description about this, or where might I find this. You can use that search bar, and then you can see, even if you've never seen it before, you can find those locations. And if it's not there, you can go, oh, I'll set up a page to do just that. And then jot down your notes accordingly. Thank you. That brings us to the end of the recording of the workshop on SOKI. If you have any further questions, then please do not hesitate to contact us via the SOKI website. Thank you for listening.